Hi, it's Stuart Sutton at 1 Acre Plus Homes. Hope you're doing well today. We do specialize in homes on an acre or more, and this week's 1 Acre Plus tip has to do with expenses related to the transaction. We're going to talk about some expenses that can affect the buyer or the seller. So you might find this helpful no matter what you're doing regarding the transaction, buying or selling. When it comes to a home on an acre or more, there's a little more expense involved in the inspection process. Home inspection, termite inspection, typical for just about all homes. But on an acre or more, or even a half acre or more, a septic inspection is pretty common as well. A well inspection is common also. Both of those are very expensive portions of that property, and you need to be very aware of their condition. We're going to focus on the septic inspection because this just happened to us again. And when I say again, this has happened many times, so that's why I'm bringing this up. The expense of the septic inspection is the responsibility of the buyer, just like the expense of the home inspection and the termite inspection. Bottom line is that some inspectors prefer to have the septic tank pumped at the time of inspection. So now we're not just talking about a septic inspection, we're talking about the expense of pumping the septic tank, and that's not inexpensive. It's about $500. Whose expense is that? Well, it's the expense of the buyer unless it's specifically stated in the contract that the seller should pay for it. Let me repeat that. Unless it's specifically stated in the contract that the seller pays for it, the buyer will have the responsibility of paying for the pumping of the septic tank. Now, some buyer agents assume the seller will pay for it, even though it's not in the contract. We've had that happen more than once. Matter of fact, far more than once, where a buyer's agent asked us to coordinate to have it paid for. I then would point out very simply that it's not in the contract that the seller's obligated to pay for it. Their response would be something like, well, it's normal, the seller always pays for it. Well, no, that's not the case. It's not normal. Is it uncommon? Well, maybe not. It's not uncommon for a seller to pay for the septic to be pumped before the inspection. That's not uncommon. But it's not the norm. The norm is whatever's in the contract, whatever the contract calls for. Some septic inspectors even assume the seller will pay for it. We just had one call us and ask for payment when it was not in the contract. I pointed out, just like I have before, that it's not in the contract. My seller's not obligated to pay for that. Now, whose fault is that, and who should pay for it? Well, here's what I consider to be the bottom line. If it's not written into the contract, then the seller is not responsible for it. The buyer is. If the buyer agent did not write it into the contract and did not inform their buyer that that was their expense, now that issue is between the buyer and the buyer's agent. And it's between them, very simply. More often than not, of course, the buyer will pick up the expense. I personally feel like the agent should be responsible for that expense if they didn't inform their buyer of that. But again, that's between the buyer and the seller. Bottom line is, if it's not in the contract, then the seller is not responsible for it. So in this situation, once again, I saved my seller about $500 because we pay attention to all the terms in the contract and make sure that we're protecting those that we represent. I hope that makes sense. Thanks for taking the time to listen. I hope this was informative. If I can help in any way, let me know. Hope to meet you soon so that you can experience the new level of real estate service. Thanks so much, and remember, it's your choice, so make it a powerful day. Bye-bye.